What is going on in chapter 41 for those who have been here or those who might know off the top of their heads in general? What's going on?
Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams.
Joseph has interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. Is this his first dream interpretation? Nope. He's had dreams of his own early on in his life, and then while he was in prison, he interpreted the baker and the butler's dreams. How did it work out for the baker and the butler, respectively, there? Yeah, the butler worked out pretty well. He got to get his old job back serving Pharaoh. The baker, not too good. And Joseph asked the butler a favor whenever he was reinstated. What was that favor? He said, whenever you get out of here, you remember that I'm still here and get me out. And did the butler hold up on his end of the bargain?
Not for 2 years.
Yeah, so 2 years he forgot. 2 whole years he forgot. That's a long time when you're sitting in prison and waiting, right? And you think about, there's a sidebar. Joseph had so many things go wrong in his life, things that were not his fault. You think about how his brothers treated him, what Potiphar's wife did to him, and now what this so-called possibly a friend did to him when he helped him out with the dream interpretation. And what do we never see about, at least nothing is recorded about Joseph? What would be the natural reaction of things like that going on in your life?
Woe is me.
Woe is me, a little bitterness, a little maybe reluctance to reach out and help people.
Blame God.
Maybe get mad at God for how things are going in your life. But do we ever see an indication of that in his life? Not that's recorded. I'm not saying it wasn't there. I'm not saying he didn't have bad days, but it's not recorded. He makes a pretty good attitude of what's going on. So he interpreted those dreams. What finally prompted the butler to remember about Joseph? Pharaoh had a dream and no one could interpret it. And all of a sudden a little light bulb goes off and goes, oh, hey, I know somebody. And we talked a little bit about that. We don't know if, again, did the butler just forget? Did he, once he got back to his old job, did he have any need for what Joseph could do for him? No. But all of a sudden this comes up with Pharaoh having the dream, and either it reminds him of Joseph, innocently, or two, he could be going like, oh, here's another advantage I can get if I can help Pharaoh out. Joseph comes in regardless. He interprets a dream, and we went through the whole thing of the 7 fat cows, the 7 skinny cows, the 7 full ears, the 7 lean ears, about them eating up the healthy but not getting any better in appearance. Joseph interprets all that dream as being 7 years of plenty coming, followed by 7 years of famine. And then what else did Joseph do? What extra information did he give? Because he was tasked with interpreting the dream.
So Pharaoh wanted to have a gather the good years and then to cover the famine.
He gave him a solution, right? He goes, find you a wise man and put him over this process and take advantage of the 7 years of plenty so you'll be able to survive the 7 years of lean. Again, it's not stated, but where did Joseph get that information? No doubt, right? Because how old a man was he? 30. It tells us when he stands before Pharaoh he's 30, so he's right in that area, right? That's a pretty good insight at 30. For someone who has, how much experience did Joseph have running anything?
He ran the household of
Yes. Well, he wasn't in charge of the sheep, because remember he was sent out to talk to his brothers, right, when they sold him into slavery, so he wasn't in charge of that. So in that age of 20 to 30, when he gets to Egypt, he's put in charge of Potiphar's house. He gets to jail, he's put in charge of the jail, and now he's going to be put in charge of a country, the leading superpower of its day, if you will, at 30. I'm just asking, that's not typical, right? You don't typically see 20 to 30-year-olds doing that. How old do you have to be to run for president of the United States? Anybody know?
35.
35, but he goes civics class. That's pretty good. They want you to have a little bit of age, right, to do something like that. So again, I bring that up to say that God is with him. God has given him this wisdom. God has helped him with this discretion to be able to do that. So he begins to take care of the country. What does Pharaoh do for him as he puts him in charge? He gets him a wife. He gives him several things to show he's in charge, the signet and things like that. But then he gets married, and he begins to take over and run the country, because what did Pharaoh tell him? He's going to take over the country partially or completely?
Legally.
He said, only in name am I going to be greater than you. Yeah, you're going to do everything. He's basically the figure of speech he used. He goes, there's not going to be a person in Egypt who raises their hand or puts down their foot without you being aware of it or being in control of it. So that's how complete he is.
It's also interesting, you see God's wisdom in the process, and you get this little household that he gets to run. Kind of gets to see the government side of things from being inside Pharaoh's prison. And now he gets kind of the worst of the country. Now he's over to the country, so it's not immediately thrown into running a country.
Right. It's kind of a progression there, right? And the Bible talks about that too, because again, you think about how the church is set up, New Testament. What is one of the qualifications for being an elder?
Rule your household.
Well, true, rule your household. Well, that's true. That's good. But I was thinking more of what he was thinking, that you're looking for a little bit of age. I mean, do you take a 20-year-old in the church and make him an elder? Yeah, or a new convert? No, that's not what we do.
The word implies that someone older.
Right. Even the word itself, you think of someone at least with hopefully gray hair, and I qualify for that at that point. At least that one qualification now. I got that one. So that gets us about 45. Anything else in there in the first little bit?
Well, Pharaoh acknowledges that God, the Spirit of God.
He does. He does say that. I'm trying to think what he said exactly
28.
in verse 28. 38. Yeah, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Now the question we have, that I have, I don't know if we got enough, if there's enough in that verse to tell, is he referring to the God? Or, because what is Pharaoh's background? What is the Egyptian's background is religiously?
He's a priest himself.
Well, he believes he's a God, but also polytheism, right? They believe in multiple of gods. So he no doubt sees the wisdom and attributes it to a divine nature. Again, whether he's a true believer, I don't know. I can't say. I don't know if that verse can give us enough to tell us that he's actually talking about.
Well, Joseph said, God's the one that interprets, not me. So
Every time he was given that opportunity to take, where he could have taken credit for himself in interpreting a dream, he always said, "This is from God. It has nothing to do with me." True. Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if there's any significance or not, but in 45, it says that Pharaoh, really, I don't know if he changes it, but he calls Joseph by a different name.
Mhm.
But then go forward, we still see Joseph referred to as Joseph.
Right.
Is there any significance for the name that he gave him there in 45?
The name actually means abundance of life, is the name he gave him, because that's what, if Joseph, I guess it's kind of like Pharaoh's hanging his hat on that, of him being right and true. It's a big hope, right? Because here he is taking a Hebrew, a foreigner, and elevating to this position. Because what if he's wrong? What if it's like one good year and then a bunch of bad years, or what if the bad years never come and he's put this Hebrew in charge? So it's a big. I mean, he interpreted his dream, but Pharaoh has no idea of really knowing if that's the correct interpretation, right? The proof is in the pudding, as we say. But that's what he's hoping. He's hoping that if Joseph is right, I'm going to give you this name because you're going to store up this corn for 7 years, and then you're going to save this country. And not only save this country, and Pharaoh probably didn't understand this, but save the countries around us. Because everyone's going to run out of food. So that's the significance of his name. Now, again, the Bible is written from, if you will, the Hebrew perspective. That's who's telling the story. So even though Pharaoh gave him that name, the name Joseph is going to stick because that's where it's coming. Unlike where Jacob was given the name Israel, but then continued to be referred to as Jacob for a while before he actually fulfilled or laid hold to that name Israel, if you will.
Chris,
Yes, ma'am?
I have a footnote, it's a man-made footnote, but it says his new name indicated that Pharaoh had made him an Egyptian citizen.
That
So that, I don't know if that's just man-made, but.
That's probably true when you look at the uniqueness of the name. I'm sure it was an Egyptian name because Pharaoh's giving him this again, it's the Hebrew, elevating him to this position. The Egyptians would realize that he's a foreigner. They probably never forgot that. But again, if you give him an Egyptian name, it's like he gets Americanized, right? And you think about how, and you hear this if you watch history and stuff, when America was first starting and people were immigrating over here, what did a lot of them do when they got here?
Change the name.
They changed their name. They Americanized their name. And I even think, I'll use Katie for example, her family. Her last name is Reiner. And it's spelled R-I-N-E-R. But guess how, if you look at their genealogy, how was it originally spelled? R-H-I-N-R. Where do you think she's from? That's the river in Germany. So, I mean, that again, they dropped that, they Americanized their name. So, again, that would be Pharaoh trying to help assimilate him into the Egyptian culture and way of life. Flash forward to what we haven't read, but we know the story. What happens 7 years later when his family comes to see him, not knowing it's him? Do they recognize him? They don't even know who he is. Now you think about, 7 years, I mean, he's been gone for a while now. It's longer than 7 years, probably closer to 10 or so. But remember, you talked about when he shaved himself to go before Pharaoh, we talked about that. It wasn't necessarily just shaving. It was shaving. He's older. The way he dressed, the way he speaks through them through an interpreter, through a different language, all that stuff, they didn't know who he was. So had he been Egyptianized, if that's a word? Has he been assimilated into their culture? Yeah. Yeah, he has. What else?
Well, all of that, though, he never left God.
Oh, no. Physically, actually, does where we live, does it matter? America, and rightfully so, thinks this is the best country. To be American is everything. But it doesn't have anything to do with being a Christian. Could you be a Christian in the Middle East?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Anywhere else, right?
Some countries it'd be harder.
No doubt about that. Some countries it's hard, but where you're from and what culture you might be living in has nothing to do with how devout or non-devout you can be to God. So yeah.
There's another fine example of that.
What do you say?
Daniel's another good
Daniel.
example of that.
And Daniel, then again, you think about the names. This is we're going way off subject, but oh well. What were Daniel and them given? Different names, right? I mean, what do we call them? We call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Again, names that were given. That's not right. That wasn't their name. Were they given different names?
Yeah, they were given different names.
But they're given those names, but you don't hear them, right? After that. But again, that was a thing to do, especially with conquering a land or assimilating a people. Was again, you change their name. Did two things. You try to get them into your culture and try to get them away from their culture, right? That's what they do when they would capture nations. They would split them up, move some here, move some there, put some in this part if they had a big empire. Because if you had people from one country altogether, what might they tend to do? Yeah, they're going to revolt. If they got people who are like culture, like faith, like family, they're going to eventually revolt. So, again, that's all politics. Anything else? All right, someone read for me. Read verses 46 through 52.
Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Now in the 7 plentiful years, the ground brought forth abundantly. So he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. Joseph gathered very much grain, as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, when Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction.
Okay, thank you, Rick. So again, we already talked about he was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh to take over the country. Very young man to have this much responsibility. And does his interpretation of his dream come true in the first 7 years? Yes. It says the land, I think Riggs' version says, well, land produced abundantly. King James says, by the handfuls. This,
And later on says without number.
it's indescribable how well things were going. And you can think, Joseph seems to be a little bit of the analytical persuasion, keeping track of everything with numbers and whatnot as he's playing this grain of storing it. But finally he gets to the point where he just says, yeah, just keep bringing it. There's just no point of counting anymore because it was just so much. So they didn't even keep a record of it, of how much they were putting away, because there was no point to it anymore, because it was just a vast amount of product he was putting away. What else happens in what Rig read in these verses?
2 sons.
He has 2 sons there in his 7 years. Calls the first Manasseh and the second Ephraim. And the Bible actually tells us what those names mean. What does Manasseh mean?
Forget my toil.
What do you think he means by that, forget my toil? You think of toil as necessarily work, but what's he making him forget?
It's hard that you had.
Yeah.
Being a slave.
That's the part I get. It's almost not necessarily the toil, but like the bad times. Because what else does he add to it? What else did it make you forget? That's the part I question. Because did he forget his father's house?
But he forgot there, that was the cause of it.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's almost like an expression in hope. Maybe things are going to go well enough here that I'll forget what all I left.
When you concentrate on your family, you tend to put other things away. You don't like when you were a kid, you went a lot to your cousins and so forth, the other uncles and stuff, houses and stuff. But as you got older and you got a family and started taking care of your family, you didn't go visit your uncles and aunts and all that stuff as much.
That's true. I mean, that you think when you're younger and you're independent, yeah, you go because your family go and see, visit cousins and relatives. But as you get older and you get a job and you get a wife and you get your own kids, all of a sudden your circle starts to constrict a little bit because you're concerned with what you got going on in your own life and taking care of your own kids, and so much then you don't have that extra time to go and do as much other places. So again, I guess I just brought that up because Joseph never forgot, as we're going to see here shortly when his brethren show up. But
You didn't hold it against them.
no, he doesn't hold him against him. But again, it's just it's like it's almost like wishful thinking, right? He's wishing the bad memories away.
When you think about it, he talks about having his toil put behind him, so we say the hard life. Talking about putting his father's house behind him, that's the iniquity that came through his brothers. What he's wanting to do is put everything negative in his life behind him. So Joseph is definitely an optimist, but every optimist has their negative thoughts in the back of their mind. So Joseph's been dwelling on these things, and I mean, once you get into chapter 42, it's almost like you would almost think like he's praying to God, because in chapter 42, God gives him the opportunity. Here's your opportunity to put your father's house behind you.
Right.
Because it's all in that same context of the negative.
Right. And that's a trouble that again, different people are different ways. But there's some people who go through horrible things in their life. And when we all go through tough things, but some people go through truly horrible things. And some people can't get past it. They can never let go or get beyond what happened enough to have a happy life going forward. They can't help but dwell on the past. And then some people you talk to, and they're a happy-go-lucky person, and you get to know them, and you find out about their life, and you're like, ooh. The fact that you're a happy person, the fact that you're where you are right now emotionally, that's amazing depending on what you've gone through. Now for a Christian, you think about that, that's all physical stuff. You think about it on the spiritual side, what does the Bible tell us in the New Testament with those who, when they come out of the world and they become a Christian, but they linger there, God forgives them, but they can't seem to forgive themselves. And what is the danger there? For those who dwell on their past life or dwell on the sins of their past life, what have you seen?
You get drawn back into the
It'll suck you back in. You've got to be very, very careful. That again, once you become a Christian, that opportunity you're given, that you don't forget it, like Joseph here, but man, you've got to move on, because the danger if you don't is getting pulled back into it, or being so bitter, even though you might not get pulled, it creates another problem for you. you can't let it go. The beauty of being forgiven, the beauty of all of that is to hopefully let it go, and move forward, and be happy in this life, and hopefully be happy in the next, right?
I think it has to do with complete forgiveness at this point. I'm sure Joseph, in his heart, he's not angry at his brothers. You don't see, because at this point, at several points, he could already exact judgment, and whenever they come, he can already exact judgment. So he's already behind it somewhat, but he's wanting a complete absolution to the issue that lies there. And
Yeah.
so that's what God's going to allow him to have.
And also the danger, sometimes, again, this is way off subject, but it's worth talking about. We need to watch ourselves, because a lot of times we'll separate ourselves from a bad situation, and then it's easier to forget about that when you're out of it. But what's getting ready to happen with Joseph here in the next chapter? Ooh, it's going to be brought face to face. He's going to be thrown right back into it. That's where you got to be really careful that you don't allow anger and malice and all those old feelings, justified or not, to come creeping back up. You've got to, again, always realize how much that we have been forgiven and be able to extend that grace and forgiveness to other people, right? Even if they're not asking for it. Even if they don't deserve it. Again, because did we deserve it? No. Anything else there? All right, someone read 53 to the end of the chapter.
And the 7 years of plenteousness that were in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according to Joseph has said. And the dearth was in all the land, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. And when the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph. What he saith, do to you do. And the famine was over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold them to the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. All the countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because the famine was so sore in all the lands.
So here we have the good times are gone. The plentiful food is gone. And I don't know, you would think there had to be a proclamation throughout the land of what they were going to do, and an explanation why, hey, we're going to have 7 good years, and then there's going to be 7 bad. But when you kind of read these few verses, does it kind of indicate that people might have forgotten that the 7 bad years were coming? It seems to indicate that, right? Because you get caught up in the good times, right? Everything's good. Everything's going well. All of a sudden, it just turns off, and the food runs out. And then, because where do the people go when they're completely out of food? They go to Pharaoh. And what does Pharaoh do? Again, leader of the country. What does he do?
Go get Joseph.
Whatever Joseph tells you to do it. I didn't write this in my notes, but just thought about this. I did a lesson, probably poorly, Wednesday night, about the idea of shadows in the Old Testament being fulfilled in the New. Is there any doubt that Joseph is a shadow or a type of Christ? Any doubt? No.
You see it all the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. And what does Pharaoh get? Pharaoh says, whatever he says to do it. That just reminded me. Do you remember whenever Jesus did his first miracle, and his mom said, "Hey, go talk to Jesus," and Jesus said, "Hey, my time's come before. I'm not ready to do this yet. It's not really time." And what did the advice his mother give to the people around?
Whatever he does, you do it.
Whatever he says, do it.
And we see God saying the same thing, Matthew 17:5.
Yep. Here's my beloved son. Hear ye him. Yep. And so again, when I didn't write that in before, but when I read it just then, I should probably go back and write that note. That'll be in the gospel account. I'm not sure where, but it's exactly the same advice. Whatever he says, do. And that's what the world has trouble telling, right? Because they whatever implies the totality of everything. What do most people want to do who claim to be religious?
Is it here what they want to hear?
Yeah, I'll agree with that, and I'll do this part, and I like this. It's like going to Luby's, right? You just pick what you want. But he goes, whatever he says, totality, do it. You got to do it all.
Right, and that shows submission, back to your point of what people want to do.
they want to pick and choose, but then what does the world teach is that you can take Christ as your personal Savior. We don't have that. We have the power to obey. We can't make Christ do what he said he's not going to do, or to direct him as such to where he is in subjection to us.
Right. Doesn't work that
they
way.
don't think about it that way, but when you listen to what is being said there, you're picking and choosing, and Christ will just be happy. He'll have to be happy with it.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
It's the old, again, it comes back to obedience. It's the old analogy of like, if someone tells you to do like 5 things, and you do 4 of them because you agree with them, and the question is, how much did you obey? Did you obey 80% of what he said? You didn't obey anything that he said, because you only did what you agreed to do. When you get to that one-off that you don't agree with, you're not going to do it. So there's no obedience there. That's why again the scene in the New Testament where we're going to be in Judgment Day, and people are going to come before Christ and God, and they say, hey, we did this for you. We did this in your name. All this stuff we did because that's what we wanted to do. And Christ says, yeah, you were pretty close. You were almost there. He says, I don't even know who you are. I never knew
Which
you.
means they never obeyed.
Never even come close to obeying.
Yeah.
So-
They did a partial, like you said, but they didn't completely obey.
Yep. It's man's thoughts versus God's thoughts, right? So the famine is over. So when the famine, Joseph, like he said, he kind of does. It's not like Joseph at the beginning of the 7 bad years opened the storehouses. He waited till it got bad. He's holding out because again, he's got to make everything last for 7 years. So hopefully the people saved up some corn on their own too, right? Besides the 20% that was being collected. So when it gets bad, he finally begins to open the storehouses. And I thought it was interesting. You would thought he would, like our government, just give stuff away, ha ha ha, right? Give stuff away. But does he give it to the Egyptians?
No, he sells it.
No, he sells it. So again, Egypt is prospering greatly at this time. And then in verse 57, you see the providence coming full circle. What happens in verse 57?
All of the countries start coming.
Yeah, because it's not just an Egyptian famine, it's a famine in the whole area. Everybody's out of bread, so everybody finds out word of mouth pretty quick. Egypt has food. Let's go to Egypt and get it. So who is coming back to Egypt now to be reunited with Joseph? His family, and that is from God. God is bringing this back full circle so Joseph can have a chance to be back with his family. Yes, sir?
We don't know, it's not stated to us if the government, we might say, did they purchase all this grain to start with, or did they confiscate it?
It sounded almost like it was a tax the way I read it. We don't know, but it sounded like it was like a 20% tax almost, is what it was.
Sell it for more than 20%.
Well, they said a fifth. They took him a
It's
fifth.
like a fifth of fruit and a tenth of wheat.
Okay.
A fifth of fruit and a tenth of wheat.
I think it mentions as a fifth of the corn. I think is what it talks about. So it doesn't sound like they were paying the people for it then. It sounds like it was. It reads to me. I could be very wrong, but it reads to me like it was a tax. Kind of like your Social Security. They take it away from you, and they want you to tell them thank you when they give it back to you with no interest.
You stop, if the farmers, we say, are with so much abundance, what are they doing with it?
Right.
Why is it being stored up for hard times? What are they doing with it?
And
now it's not there, all of a sudden it's not there in their family, so now they're having to come and get it or buy it.
They're probably not aware.
Did the government come confiscate it also because they knew it was going to happen, or?
again, yeah, it doesn't say, but you would think again. We were told it's 20%. So if they put up, we talked about this last week. They put up 20% for 7 years, and they're going to be able to feed the whole country and other countries for 7 years of famine. That just tells you how much it was. So the question kind of leads curiosity-wise: what did they do with the 80% they kept? It had to be a massive amount. Well, they probably did what people typically do when they get a lot of extra stuff. They spend it, and they might save some of it, but apparently it wasn't enough. I don't know. It doesn't tell us how far into the 7 years they come and start asking for food, but they run out, And then they come to Joseph. So maybe, who knows, maybe they lasted a year or so. We're just not told how long they were able to hold out.
Do the same thing in today's society, like you said. Works really good, people buy the bigger trucks, the bigger houses.
Oh yeah, look at the oil field, dude. Oil's $100 a barrel. Everybody's driving an F-350 with light bars on, and all of a sudden, bye. They're all repossessed because no one can afford to live that way, right? When the oil crashes, but yeah, it's typical. The average savings rate in America is like $500 or something like that. It's just people just don't think ahead. They don't think ahead physically, and they definitely don't think ahead spiritually. Good enough. That's 41. Going into 42. Someone read. We're not gonna get very far at all. Someone read the first 8 verses.
Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one on another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get ye down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. And Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him.
Okay, thank you. So what does Jacob send or task his sons with, first part of the chapter? He said, we're starving here. Why are you sitting around looking at each other? Let's do something, right? Let's go do something. And they had heard at that time that Egypt had corn. He says, so go and get some. Does he send them all? Who does he hold back? Why? His youngest? Yeah, the idea, we've seen this story play out over the idea of a little bit of favoritism. The last son from his favorite wife. He'd already lost Joseph. Again, the other son from his favorite wife. There were sons from his old age. We talked about that, possibly having to do something with that. He might have spent more time with them. But he sends them all, but not Benjamin. Again, what does that do? What message does that send to the other brothers?
He says mischief doesn't befall him, and that's kind of what happened with Joseph before.
Right.
Because there, something happened to him, he thinks that he got into something that hurt him, but he doesn't know the real story yet.
Right.
So.
But again, that's true. That's all true. But the big thing that I'm looking at is the fact that it shows favoritism, right? And favoritism wrecks people, wrecks families.
How old was Jacob?
Jacob's old, dude. He's got to be. Yeah, he might have had one son stay home. I mean, there's all possible reasons, right? And even within favoritism, there's all possible rationalizations that parents have. Oh, this is my only daughter. Oh, this is my oldest. This is my youngest. Whatever the ration, and it could be correct. He's old. He might need to, keep a son at home, take care of him, right? But the result, again, it's not stated here, but what we know the result with Joseph, right? We get the whole story over there. Were the brothers happy with Joseph? No, they hated him. They wanted to kill him. They were so angry, right? So it doesn't tell us that about Benjamin, but if the brothers already have that inclination, do you think the thoughts are that much different towards Benjamin? I mean, Benjamin would not go into him and say, hey, I'm having dreams where you're all going to worship me. That might not be going on, but still, oh, Benjamin can stay home? Great. Yeah, we'll make the trek to Egypt and go get food for the family and bring it back to our father and his favorite son. That just doesn't sit well. So again, this cautionary notes. Again, that's why they're always going to have favoritism within families, within companies, within governments. You're always going to have it. Where do you not have it?
The church, you shouldn't have the church.
Still going to have it in the church because man of people. You're right. But when God comes, there is no favoritism. Nothing. What does he tell about the people who served him their whole life versus those who show up in the evening? It's the same. There's no favoritism. There's no, you're better, I like you better for this or that. It is, if you serve me, honest, good and honest heart, you get it all. So again, that just shows the difference between man and God, right? What does Joseph do when his brothers finally show up? He disguises himself so they don't recognize who he is. What else does he do?
How corrupt it was.
Yeah, I can't help but think he probably enjoyed that a little bit. I mean, I know he was. Joseph was a good guy, but I know he probably took a little bit of satisfaction of. And again, we learn in the next few verses he's not talking directly to them; he's talking to them through an interpreter. But I can only imagine the loudness of his voice and his gestures and everything. And they're probably going like, "What's he saying?" Right? And then the interpreter comes and goes like, "He thinks you're spies." What? You know? And so things are going well for us. So he's going to give them a little bit of a hard time. But the difference is there are people who thrive on giving people a hard time. I mean, I'm not a big conflict guy. So like even if you go to the store and you buy something, I hate going and arguing with people and say, this is how you're doing me wrong, or a contractor. That doesn't make me feel good inside. Right? I don't. There are people who thrive on that. We're going to have an argument? Yeah, let's go. Put me out front. They live for that. So when Joseph does what he does here, and talking roughly to his brethren, we haven't read it yet, but what shows us he's different?
He goes that week, right?
It tears him up, right? It's hard on him. So he doesn't, again, that shows that gentle spirit, that tender nature inside of him. Even though he's putting on a little bit of a show right here, it's not who he is. It's his heart's not in it.
He wants to repay them according to what they deserve, but
Yeah, can't do it. Can't do it. Anything else in those first 8 verses?
a massive thing here is, like, I mean, this is demonstrated all through Joseph's life, but especially here, the providence of God. If you go back to chapter 41, he already named a child after God having put his family behind him.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity to put his family behind him. And it just so happens that his brothers come from Canaan all the way to Egypt to the location where Joseph's at. We already know that they're storing it up in different cities. You see that chapter 41 and verse 48, everything's being stored in different cities. And so it just so happens they narrow in on where Joseph is on that day. Joseph's over everything, so you would kind of imagine he's going from, I guess you could say, distribution center to distribution center. But on that day, boom,
Yep.
face to face.
They're either brought together providential, which is no doubt is providential, but again, that's things we don't know. Do you think Joseph might have known they were going to be showing up? Possibly. Yeah, he might have put the word out. Bring me a list of anybody from Canaan that's coming looking for food. I just want to review the names. He might have been looking for it, but no doubt this whole thing is working out providentially for God to bring the family back together, so this interaction can take place.
They bowed before him, just like his dream.
Yeah, that's something else that it's going to say in verse 9. We stop one verse short. But when his family comes in to get the corn and they bow down, where does his mind exactly go?
The dreams he had earlier.
Ooh, he goes, there it is. And he gets to see it, but do his brethren see it?
No.
Not yet. But once they figure out, I'm sure they're going to go like, ooh. When you think about it afterwards, you're like, yeah, that was right. He was right on that account.
And look, no doubt that it's God's planning and stuff like that, but they're the ones who put him there.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, or used it for good.
It's pretty interesting that like after they bow, it says he remembers his dream. It kind of is like when Jacob already knew that Joseph was going to be a child growing in prominence, but when Joseph brought up his dream, Jacob at first at least appears
Didn't
to
agree
be
with it, yeah.
irritated, and then he remembered it, and so it was like he had forgotten the promise already, and so in this case it's almost like Joseph had forgotten about it. Like it definitely crept to the back of his mind, and now it happens. And so, I don't know, like something that makes me think of, you got all these people out there, I received a dream from God, they interpret their own dream. Joseph never interpreted his own dream.
Yeah. Never saw the actual fulfillment.
He was like, this is a dream God gave me. I don't know how it's going to pan out.
Right. There was no specific, like 3 days later,
Yeah.
this is going to happen, you're going to be elevated back to your position. And speaking of the butler, he tells him, the first dream he tells him of his brothers. The second dream he throws in his parents, the sun and the moon. And his parents actually, again, should have known and go like, oh, we're going to worship. No, that ain't going to happen. They get a little offended by that. But again, the ultimate fulfillment is like Joseph had actually seems to have forgotten, or because he's been busy, right? He's got a lot going. He's running a country. And all of a sudden, his family shows up and bows down before him. He's like,
That may go back,
Oh,
part
yeah.
of that where he said he forgot his family.
yeah, that's what he was saying. He actually, maybe he had managed to put it out of his mind some, maybe. Seems like a big thing to put out of your mind. But again, he's definitely reminded of when they show up and they bow before him. He's reminded of the dreams he had when he was a young man. Time frame, it seems this is about, so if he was 30 years old before Pharaoh, 7 years down the road now, and we're into the bad times, so that's another 7+. He's 37 to 40. So it's been 15 or 20 years since he's interacted with his family. It's been a while. And a person changes a lot between 20 and 40, especially except with the garb and the way he's presenting himself here in Egypt. Did the bell ring? Are we out? Are we done?